Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast series, powered again by citiesabc.com and openbusinesscouncil.org. And in this series, we've been portraying the people changing the world. And I'm having a recurrent author that I interview already. And today we're going to be going to a new level. So QuHarrison Terry, a man that doesn't need a lot of introduction, that is doing fantastic stuff, both as a writer that is kind of 2 books in 2 years. That's quite impressive. And as well, working in cutting edge areas. I think the bio, I'll shortly just highlight some of the highlights, but author and digital global expert and marketeer, head of growth marketing and Mark Cuban Companies, and as well, a personality on LinkedIn and in social media. And that recently launched the book, The Metaverse Handbook, Innovating for the Internet's Next Tectonic Shift. And the title is fantastic. A guide to every aspect of the technology and cultural change related to the metaverse. So QuHarrison has been featured on all the major global media, from CNN to Huffington Post and so forth, but is as well a co-host right now at CNBC's No Retreat, Business Bootcamp, a series of centers that centers around the philosophy of Wall Street famous brokers Joe De and is materialized on his off-the-grid elite Vermont training facility known as the Farm. And as well, what I'm interested in is that he is a personality that touches theory and practice, that is always looking a step ahead and looking at the next 5 to 10 years, mostly between the strategy, the practice, and how to take this and make a business out of this. And today, of course, we're going to be talking about the book, about Metaverse, and I have a lot of questions, how he sees this and how he's actually acting on this. So welcome again, QuHarrison. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yo, what's up? Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be back.
My pleasure. Let's go straight away to the point. So since we the first book about the NFTs, now there's one about the metaverse, and the two things are related. And before we go to the book, I want to start with some of the notes that I have here for the book, because I think it's very important to highlight this. So research from Citibank highlights that the metaverse could be a $13 trillion industry by 2030. There are studies that goes even bigger. And of course, the metaverse offers new business, sales, and commercial opportunities, boosts tourism sector, and create new experience, attract investment and global footprint, create physical and virtual jobs, and adding substantial value to the region, cities, GDP that will be targeting these areas. And then picking on your book, and it's a book that I did already. Actually, I inaugurated my series Books ABC about the book. So if people listening to us, please feel free to see my review. But I think what I love about the book, and let's go to the point. So the book, just for people listening to us, The Metaverse Handbook, Innovating for the Internet Next Tectonic Shift, authored by QuHarrison Terry and Scott DJ Ski Cuney. First of all, let's redefine metaverse, because I want to start by that, because that's so much myth around the concept and so much confusion that I think it's really important to repeat. Even with my team, I have to repeat multiple times until people get it.
Yeah, so the way I like to think about the metaverse is twofold. The first part is the metaverse hasn't really happened yet. So there's no general defined definition. Most definitions you'll find about the metaverse are pretty complex, to keep it simple. But the way I like to think about it, and if I were to give a definition to it, I think the metaverse introduces the spatial web. And what I mean by that is the internet that we know today, the one that we're talking on as we record this podcast right now, is largely 2D. I'm talking to you on Zoom. You can kind of get a awareness or sense of my background and my environment, but largely only because of the 2D picture that you see. When we go into metaverse environments, you'll be able to have pass-through features where I'm in a headset and I can have a mixed reality component. I can take notes in right here in air, and you'll be able to see those, and I can send those to you, and you can manipulate that. And we've seen total recreation and immersion of your surroundings. So I think the Oculus or the Meta Quest 2, if you put that headset on and you go into your living room, You can be literally in your living room and in the virtual recreation of that living room, and it could be anywhere you want it to be. You could be in space, you can be in an abstract environment. And this is really the first inning. But the spatial web is really thinking about, what are the digital what are the digital domains that we have, and how can we bring them to life and kind of create this mixed reality, immersive viewpoint and perspective. And I know that that might be even a lot, but just think of it as the evolution of the internet as we're going beyond phones and tablets and into glasses and contact lenses and things where we'll be able to transpose information readily in front of us in ways that we just hadn't think of. So there's a new spatial awareness that is existing, and the metaverse is usually the catch-all term for that.
And so let me provoke you a bit on that, because you said it still doesn't exist. But I would say that in some ways, let's say if you have an experience in Roblox, if you have an experience in Decentraland or Second Life or Sandbox or all these things, in some ways it starts to happening in a lot of ways. Okay, and of course, if you are in Meta, in one way you're already there, even if it's not completely in the vision that you are just described. How do you see this bridge right now?
So I think the bridge between today and tomorrow is right now to use any of the metaverse experiences beyond the video games. It's still there's still some adjustments that need to be had, right? It's still not a seamless approach. Where I really feel like we're at with VR or any of the metaverse activities that you've kind of seen is it still is pretty much a developer and a nerd and a geek thing to do. And it's becoming more accessible by your general consumer. Like you can go into Target or Walmart or Amazon and buy a Oculus Quest 2, and you can have a standalone VR experience. But if you really want to experience the metaverse, you probably need a mixed reality headset. We're thinking, Microsoft's HoloLens 2, HTC has the Index 2 or the Valve Index 2. So you have like these headsets, and what's fascinating about those headsets is they cost a lot of money. They're probably 3-4 times the price of what you would pay for a Meta Quest 2. And, you still have the cords, and you need a pretty powerful PC to drive that experience. But that experience is intrinsically different than what we get in the standalone option. And there's still a bridge, right? The thing that I'm most impressed by is we're going to get to a point where we go beyond the headsets. Like the headsets are clunky. Like if you remember smartphones before they were the iPhone and the Android devices that we have today, they were pretty big. There was a lot of buttons that were not well designed. We used them and we enjoyed them, but they also were very limited in their capacity. And, people that had smartphones, they had them for very specific reasons. Like you had a BlackBerry if you wanted to send emails back and forth. You had a Palm Pilot if you really wanted to have your full address book in the palm of your hand. If you had any of the Motorola offerings, it was because you kind of liked cool technology, but a lot of it was gimmicky. And I think where we're at today, it's not necessarily the video game stuff is not a gimmick, but I don't think video games are the best version of the metaverse to show people because they're not that different than what existed before. So what's awesome about Roblox is we can all go into Roblox. We can all have our experiences. It is a little young by nature as far as the audience that's there and the demographics, but it is all simultaneous. So we're all in the world, and we can change and manipulate and participate in that experience together in ways that video games, 10, 15 years ago just weren't able to handle. Like the technology wasn't there, the servers, even the processing power needed to do that just wasn't there. And so I look at it and say, like, we're on the precipice. The people that are thinking about the metaverse today will probably win in 5 to 10 years once this stuff becomes more readily available in how we access and how we build the understandings of how to use the technology in the metaverse is more widely understood. Because I think that like you hand anyone an iPad today, a 2-year-old, a 60-year-old, a 30-year-old, what's happening in that example is everyone knows kind of subconsciously how to use the iPad. There's no instruction manual. people kind of figure it out. If you gave someone VR today, I don't think that they would have that same experience. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of referencing, and it's just not at that point where it's super, super, super simple. And then VR is not the final destination. We want to go beyond VR into XR, which is immersive reality. And then that immersive reality is where things, I think, get way closer to what I think the futuristic idea and domain of a metaverse is.
Completely on that part, I subscribe 100%. So on your book, you have a vision for the metaverse in 2032. So can you summarize?
In the book, I wanted to give people a glimpse of how some of the technologies that we're utilizing today come to life in just a decade from now. And one of my favorite examples from that chapter, and that's chapter 1 for those that haven't read the Metaverse Handbook, literally we jump right into it. You should check it out. It's available anywhere books are sold. But a vision for 2032 is, in my mind, was today we're in Discord and Slack, and a lot of communities and workplaces, they communicate using the apps I just described. But in those apps, if you want to make your experience very useful, one of the things that you'll do is you'll install add-ons, extensions, and bots. And a lot of those bots are very one-directional. So if I've got a status report bot or a Google Analytics report or a music bot or a stand-up bot, whatever the bot is, if I have it, I add it to the group and it gives me that value, so it saves me a click. But there's no true personality to that bot. There's no, it doesn't really exist in my day-to-day life. And what's fascinating about video games is, you do have non-player characters, or NPCs as they're described. And if you play Zelda and you go and complete the quests, you have to interact with these non-player characters, but they're very much a part of the story. And Zelda is just an example. There's many other games that utilize non-player characters. And what I think is fascinating is the metaverse allows for us to implement NPCs in real life. Like, a mixed reality situation here is I take an American flight. Flight is canceled or it's delayed severely, and I need to look at some adjustments, but I can't do it in the app because it says contact, a customer support representative. Well, today I've got to call a number. They might say they'll take my call right then. 9 times out of 10, they won't. They'll tell me I have to wait. It's probably 30 minutes. Either I hold the phone or I wait for a call back. After I get that call back, I go through the automated processing system. And then maybe at the end of that, I'll talk to a human that could help me. Usually I have to talk to a person 2 to 3 times. The interim solution today is you talk to a chatbot, but that's just equally as frustrating because it doesn't understand context and language processing just for that scale and for where we're at today, it just isn't good. So unless they have, live support humans behind the scenes, it's not, the chatbot is an even worse experience than the phone call. So when I think about the metaverse and it's say, okay, live support, customer chat, phone isn't really it because you don't have the first party data that's necessary to verify. So when you call into an airline or you call into an online e-commerce store, they have to actually go through a checklist to verify that you are who you say you are. And it's not even 100%. Like you hear all the time about social engineering and some of the calamities that ensue because of that. What's fascinating here, though, is in the metaverse, because you're already on a platform, you have a chance to get that first party data. And you can connect it on the background side, like a developer in an API. And when you exchange that data and you figure out, okay, Q is actually who he says he is, we can get past the identity verification part. I can actually talk to a virtual human. Or if I don't want to talk to a virtual human, I could talk to, a mascot of sorts. Remember Clippy from Microsoft Word? It was the little paperclip icon.
Yeah.
Like that was a non-player character that helped us all learn Word, 20 years ago. Today, we don't really have that because, there's really no need. There's a lot of intuitiveness that already exists, but I think we're going to see a resurgence of clippy like characters come back into our metaverse realities, and they're going to guide you through everything from language learning to customer support to even getting music played. Like today we have a playlist and we have an assortment of it, and Siri exists, and we have the Google assistants as well. But what is fascinating about that is, why can't they be personified by an avatar of sorts that allows the interaction to feel that much more immersive? And it's not as weird, because in order to really use the voice assistants today, unless you're holding a device in front of you, you got to talk to yourself, and that's a new skill. And so we're in this domain where the technology is capable of so many different beautiful things, but the interfaces and how we interact with them, there's still a lot to be desired. And so I think by 2032, the metaverse will have this immersive environment. A lot of the apps that we have today will probably be turned into non-player character types, and we'll have these assistants in these domains where you can have interaction seamlessly, and it's not one that's confined to the keyboard and mouse.
Completely, and I think it's the challenge. Are we going to be making this happen? That is the next challenge of humanity in a lot of ways, because this will shift a lot of stuff. So on your chapter 2, you touch one area that for me is very important. And of course, I'm not going through the entire book, but some parts. So one of the things that is important is digital shifts, which is part of the chapter 2. And you mentioned the changes to digital identity and changes to digital value. So of course, we're not going to give away all the book. I think you guys have to get it. But I think this is a key element for anything that goes from the experience that is very incipient, like you said, it's like the beginning of the internet. The streaming was bad, all the experience and everything else. But the digital identity is going to be on steroids. And I think this is one of the challenge and opportunities that is coming out of this. So can you highlight your view on these two areas?
Yeah, so if you read my first book, the NFT Handbook, we end in chapter 9 talking about, where NFTs will actually have probably the most value. And it's in these spatial environments, I believe, like what we call the metaverse, because an NFT is a digital collectible that allows for you to have scarcity in a digital sense for the first time ever. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but like, the fact that we can replicate scarcity and have that allows for us to have virtual economies. In a virtual economy, you're going to have virtual entrepreneurs. You're going to have robopreneurs. Like, what I mean by that is you'll have bots that make money because they fulfill services. And we already see that today on Twitter, where if I want to take a screenshot, there's a bot that I can tweet, and it will take a screenshot of the tweet, format it correctly so I don't have to worry about cropping or any of that, and then send it directly to me on Twitter. And that's today. That's 2022. By the time we get into the metaverse, those bots will exist. But, the same way we have on in-app purchases on our iOS and Android devices, we'll have that in the metaverse. But that will just be going to some corporation that provided a non-player character that gives you that service, right? So like, virtual humans and interactions there are pretty fascinating, but virtual goods will also exist alongside these non-player character types, which is very unique to me, because we're already starting to see it happen. If you look at Decentralized, and this isn't in the book because this hadn't happened when we wrote the book, we were just talking about virtual economies and identities. So CK Bubbles, she's a metaverse nail tech. She does nails in the metaverse, like, the same way you go to a nail salon and get a spa treatment or get gel nails or whatever you want designed. You could have that happen in the metaverse today. And this is from a person in New York who has a nail shop and does this for a living, but realized that she can't do nails all day long. It's not gonna scale. But if she designs a custom set of nails in the metaverse, and there's demand for that, those can sell while she's sleeping. Those can sell when she's on vacation. And she doesn't have to work 24/7. And she's put up a few collections, and there's demand. In Decentraland, you can see people running around with her nails. And to me, it's like, wow, we have these instances where people are taking physical jobs and tasks, bringing them into the metaverse, creating virtual economies because they're taking the commodities that would traditionally be only available to a physical existence, saying they have value. People are confirming they have value by buying these scarce assets, and then it creates this hyperloop where, or not even a hyperloop, it creates a cycle, but I guess it is a hyperloop because it happens so fast, where there is value exchanged and people do have these things tied to their identity. And we saw, again, glimpses of that with the Bored Ape Yacht Club when people were taking these pictures of apes and changing them out for their actual real identities on Twitter and other social media platforms. And that trend didn't slow down. There's a lot of other PFP projects that have actually, had some significance. I look at doodles. Whenever I'm on the internet, I see a lot of people using their doodles avatar. Azuki was very popular for a while, and they have all of these projects where that is the actions that are taking place today will probably only get amplified when the tools and platforms are a little bit more ubiquitous, and it's a lot easier to manifest these new identities and exchange these virtual goods. So the metaverse is ultimately the platform for that. I think video games, again, are a really great way to give someone a mental model as how to think about the metaverse, because when you think about Roblox, they also have that virtual economy. They have Robux, and kids convince their parents to take real money, translate it into Robux, and then kids go into Robux and they buy avatar skins. They also then can start their own businesses. Like one of the coolest I guess they call them opportunities or hobbies, and one of the coolest experiences I think in Roblox is there's this game where you can start your own pizza shop, and you can literally make a pizza, deliver it, and then people give you in-game money or currency for doing that. And you also can build houses and sell houses, and there's tons of players that do that in Roblox today and are totally comfortable putting 4 or 5 hours, the same amount of time we'd probably put into a real job like part-time. They're putting into these virtual jobs, and they're gaining virtual skill sets and virtual significance for their virtual avatars. And to me, like, it sounds weird, but if we know anything about the future, if it sounds weird today, there's probably a high probability that it's going to manifest later, because for the last 30 to 40 years, it's literally been the case.
100%. And I think we're just in the, scratching the surface, because this will be massive. So one of the things that I want to touch, and I have a lot of directions here. So one of the things that I love in the book is the concept of you pick the artifact pod, and you spoke about it in a very interesting way. So let's talk about that, because in the end of the day, you just mentioned the nails, and you're going to have, at the moment, our immersive experience in the internet is social media. Is my Facebook page, my Instagram, my TikTok, whatever the person is using. And of course, even the email for the ones more conservative, because the email was the first key to the internet, let's put it that way. So how do you see this kind of immersive pods? And I love the way you put it, but I would like to see how you take this forward.
See, I'm gonna tell people, I don't want to ruin the book because we're getting into like the first 30 to 60 pages here, but I will talk about Artifact, because since I wrote,
that's the point. The book, I think this opens doors for the book, because I think I'm not going to touch. I'm going right now more over broader, but I want to touch these parts.
Yeah. So what I like about Artifact is, again, it was a very weird concept. NFTs that are shoes. Or silhouettes of popular sneakers, no copyright infringement. And that was smart for them, because they would later get acquired by Nike for, I've heard upwards of $1 billion. That's what's rumored. No one knows the sales price, but that's what they're saying. And they had a community of they went after an audience that they knew already existed in the real world. That audience was sneakerheads and people that collect shoes and just are obsessed with collecting shoes. And they built a fandom with the people that collect shoes amongst these digital collectibles known as NFTs. They then took those NFTs and they expanded into different offerings. They have their own version of the Metaverse offering. They have their own version of the profile pictures that I just described, the PFP project. And they've created now like this universe. And because they're also partnered with Nike, now they have the resources to go beyond even some of their original visions that they probably had for the project when they first started it. And I think the team over there is just a great example of how you really should think about any of your future endeavors, whether it be in the metaverse or NFTs or just Web3 in general, is find an audience, right? I think there's a lot of emphasis bought into this idea of build a community. I think community is probably one of the most I think community is one of the most overused words in Web3, and largely because we have so many different variations and definitions of it. And most people that say it usually only mean go get a bunch of people you can sell something to in Discord. They don't actually mean do the hard work where you identify your persona, build an audience, and then build like an actual connection with them so that there's trust. And through that trust, then you can actually sell. People want to go through their Hyperloop version of that. And so they just get as many people as they want in Discord, play a numbers game. And then you have situations where unfortunate rug pulls and people get scammed out of their crypto. And I think that's one issue. And I hate that about the like Web3 right now, but I'm glad that, we're seeing less and less of that as time goes on. But what Artifact did is they built an audience and they kept building trust with that audience, and that audience they're still doing great on all their drops. And every time I see anything in the Artifact universe, it's just astounding how much momentum they've been able to maintain even after, usually you go to like a big corporation and your project goes to die because they clear the runway and they take you out the game. That's not been the case with Artifact. So I would recommend checking out the Metaverse Handbook. I go into a pretty decent case study on that. And, Ski is he's a big Artifact collector. I think he was already a sneakerhead in real life. So that was like one way to make a connection with him. And he instantly got NFTs because of it.
Yeah, and completely. And I think this part of the Artifact is an interesting example of a community vertical. The sneakers actually took a project with one of the biggest brands in the world, but actually create an entire community. But as well, they have this concept of pods, which is very interesting. And I like that read this part because it's a great part of the book that actually, I think is this kind of moments where the book really makes magic in the sense of explaining the things that are happening in front of us, but very few people see. And actually they will be having an impact going forward. So I want to go, and for us not to go, like you said, for all the book, I want to go through a couple of data. Okay. And you are as well, Mark Tier, you are a numbers guy and you think all the strategy, but as well ideas. So at the moment, there's 171 million VR headsets worldwide.
Yeah.
And 400 million kind of conventional metaverse users worldwide, which probably 200 to 300 are probably Roblox users. And most of them are 13 or younger. My daughter is one of them. So I think that how do you see these numbers? Because it's still, well, we're talking about around 500, 600 million people, and this is still very small, but it's still quite significant. And the economy of scale is going to be massive, according to, like you said, the UI, UX, and the capacity to make this simple to use.
Yeah, I mean, I see these stats and these numbers every day. And right now, the numbers, I feel like there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of people that have their own ulterior motives to get paid and, close clients. So they paint these pictures of a blue sky. And the people that oftentimes write these numbers have never actually been in VR chat. They've never been in Roblox. They've never spent time in a headset that they say, 181 million exist. So I take all that stuff with a grain of salt, mainly because if you go in here and and I mean, I'm not just preaching something, right? I've got, two headsets next to me because they die so fast, right? Like this is one and I've got another one on the floor that's charging. I spend a good amount of time in these spaces, and yeah, the numbers tell one picture, but if you spend time in some of the metaverses and you go beyond Fortnite, Roblox, you'll realize that people might have them, but they're collecting dust, because whenever you go into any metaverse today, dude, it's a ghost town. It is really a ghost town. And I think that that's like why I don't believe the numbers as much. It's uh like 8 years ago, I don't know if you remember this, but everyone used to talk about voice and the impact of voice. And they were like, by 2020, voice will be the main interface for computers and cars and all that. And I'm like, yeah, we have voice, and it's gotten way better than what it was 8 years ago, but it is by far not as far as people promised us. I mean, I've got whole books in my library about, because I mean, there was a ton of hype about, voice was going to be the interface, and you saw companies such as Google and Amazon really lean into their assistant and Nest devices and their Google Homes and Amazon's Alexas and Echo devices. And like, we saw that just become integrated with anything and everything, from refrigerators to Xboxes to, alarm clocks and cars. And still to this day, I really only use my voice assistants for playing music, checking the weather, and setting alarms. And it's been 8 years, and it could do that 8 years ago. It can do that 8 years later. And there hasn't really been that moment that has brought it to life. And even when you show someone, like, because I've got the whole house where it's connected via the voice, because I like to live in the future and try it, and it's not the best. Like, I don't do any light switches, and I don't really press too many buttons. And again, it's still not where it should be. Like, there is a lag, there's a delay, especially if you have switches. Like, if I want to turn off a light and it's not on the latest standard, it's just on a switch, there's going to be about a 6-second delay. And that's not because I've got shitty Wi-Fi or networking infrastructure. It's because it's still not to that point where it's one click by and, like, voila, it shows up at your house 5 hours later. We haven't gotten to that point where it's refined. And so that's what voice technology, something that came 8 years ago. Today, where the new thing that everyone's hyping up is VR and Metaverse. It's become the buzzword. And in that buzzwordification of the whole term metaverse, they are justifying the spin and some of the costs that are associated with this by putting out, I would say, fake data. Like, it's just not like the numbers say one thing and the actual usage says another. And the thing that I think Meta, you have to give them credit for, is if you've used the Meta Quest 2 or any of their headsets for that matter, they learned a lot from Android and iOS. They don't really let those headsets get out of date. If there's even just a little bit of things that's off, they actually make the user experience worse because they force that update. And I think that is probably the smartest thing that has happened in the VR sense, because you literally have these devices that we got, 2-3 years ago. And because they've just getting consistent updates, constant updates. What you couldn't do yesterday, you can do today, largely because there was an update that happened last night, and you're forced to get that update. But once you're on that version, now if you want to record a certain way, you can. Now, if you want to do a voice chat in a party, you can. And so they're iterating rapidly at such a rate that I haven't really ever seen that with any devices. I mean, Android would probably be the closest, but Android we're not getting OS updates as fast as we're seeing that happen on the Oculus platform. And I just haven't, what's fascinating to me is, like, I'm like, wow, like there might actually be something to that, because if we continue at this rate of the updates and Meta keeps leaning into the feedback, I do think that we're going to actually have an inflection point where this stuff does become very easy to use.
Yeah, I think the challenge is always the scalability, how you take this from the one perspective to go to the next one. And as well, how you keep bringing the audience to the different levels. So one of the visions that I have, and I'll probably here be biased because I'm building technology on that, but is that we're going to bridge, like you said, an immersive web. I would say my vision is more, let's say, if you can go the direction of Star Trek. Star Trek, you have these holograms, you have as well as Star Wars, where you have the holograms, and this is part of our visual for the last 40 years, probably 50 if you go even before in terms of science fiction, where we actually have a reality, or we actually Minority Report, all these films, where actually we have an interaction of real versus immersive, and the two things work together. So
Right.
this is, how do you see this part, especially because, for instance, one thing, we have already, let's say, Google Earth, but Google Earth is still very limited and is not scalable on these directions of what we're doing here. And if you take out of Google Earth from a global perspective, we have no utility. Like you said, most of the things right now, for instance, if you look at the biggest case studies of Metaverse, and the biggest industry right now is gaming, but of course there's healthcare, there's supply chain. And for instance, at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of things. For instance, I was recently in Turkey.
Yeah.
And I was in a manufacturing industry, and I'll pass the publicity here because I was really impressed with MAS is the Manufacturing Association of Turkey. And they built an entire metaverse experience with a digital twin. But actually, they could manage an entire factory of metal in the metaverse. And it was the most advanced case that I saw in real life of even the technology that I'm talking and building. So this is going to be, at the moment, if you do the same with healthcare, and for instance, there's already case study especially related with wellness for vets from the US in particular that have been using VR to improve their wellness and getting experiences. And for instance, I actually saw, I'm not going to talk in details, but I saw an entire immersive experience of the US Army for replicating mostly territory around the world for military purposes. So all of this is already happening. Okay, so but I think is how do you put this utilitarian part with the vision that we're talking here?
I think it's already happening, like you said, and the vision is going to be developers need to spend some time with the tech. Like a lot of the things you just described are just recently possible the last 2-3 years. And if for anyone that wants to learn more about digital twins, I would actually recommend checking out Matthew Ball's resources. He's got, a series of blogs, and he's got a book as well. And the thing that Matt does really well is he explains the digital twin thing in a way that I don't think many of us have really wrapped our heads around. And it's largely because of his experience, I think, in the entertainment industry and bringing things to life for people, where he's like, look, this game engine exists because this new game engine exists, whether it be Unreal or Unity. Entertainment can change. And when entertainment can change, other industries look at that and say, hey, I want to use that too. And, there's just so many fascinating stats from Matt that, because he's largely the digital twin thing, I think largely we all knew about it and we've all talked about it, but I haven't seen anyone else cover it as in depth or as great in detail as Matt has. And so one thing that I will add to that, because I think that what I find fascinating about the digital twin thing for like an average person, just like not necessarily a corporation, is it's never been easier to learn certain skill sets, man. Like, if you ever wanted to become, like, let's say you were like a 12-year-old kid, and instead of begging your parents for like an Xbox like I did, or a computer, or whatever 12-year-olds are begging for nowadays, right? You could literally beg your parents for a decently powered PC. It doesn't even have to be the most powerful PC, but a decently powerful PC, a VR headset, some custom controllers, and you literally could learn how to fly. You could learn how to drive a spaceship. How to drive a race car. You could learn how to literally fly a spaceship. And like the simulators that are out there they're really good in the sense that like those skills, like, no, it's not the same thing, but it is not like what I grew up with when it was like you were playing Forza, you had a little wheel and it was just entirely fake. Like today, they've got thrust and they've got, you can feel, there's a lot more presence. and you can get a sense of the controls, and you can even get a sense of the environments and surroundings. Like for Flight Simulator, it has the real-time weather data, so you can get a sense of what it's like to fly in clouds and rain and at night versus day. And I just think that that's like so fascinating. And the communities that are being brought to life, they're really small, but they exist. Like I go on Reddit and I look at the Flight Simulator community and the things that they're talking about. These are people that are just having a good time flying planes, and they're not real planes, but there are going to be some people that take those skills and translate it into real world experiences. And I'll end on this point, because I think that this topic in itself, like digital twins, we could have a whole conversation about this, and this could be a whole a podcast in itself. And like I said, Matt's got great stuff. You've mentioned some great stuff on the enterprise side, but on the skill side, I'll talk about this. Post Malone is a superstar musician, known worldwide, has had many Billboard records, and his foray into learning the guitar was through a game called Guitar Hero. So he learned how to play the guitar largely off of like just learning, the schematics off Guitar Hero. If you've ever played Guitar Hero, it's nothing like playing a real guitar, but I can see how the introduction to Guitar Hero would spark the interest to learning how to play the guitar, and like allowing you to dive deep there. When we go into these metaverse environments where we have digital twins and we can use training and simulations, and we can learn from those experiences, what's fascinating is it's not Guitar Hero. It's the real thing. Like you can get a HOTAS controller and fly a plane, and that's the same infrastructure or joysticks or buttons that you would have in an actual when you're actually flying a plane. You can get the same controller for a professional race car. You can get the same controller for, again, space, and like learning how to fly a spaceship. Those things were not afforded to my generation or even your generation. And so this next generation that's growing up in this in-between era between the metaverse and in the last era of the Web 2.0 as we know it, they have the ability to like learn skills and contribute to society in ways that we just have never seen. So I think digital twins and learning is just an industry that just hasn't been fully unlocked. And if I wanted to get into this space, like I would look at everything from ESL to foreign languages to showcasing how to like you can bring someone on a movie set for the first time. Like if I wanted to learn how to be a director, you can observe and watch a director and build a course like masterclass, but it's fully immersive. So I can see, where the lighting is set up. I can see, how the camaraderie amongst the actors and the actresses is conducted. And it might only be one situation, because you can't continuously go there because it's a digital twin and you're training. But we just haven't had anything like that to date. And like we've seen the power of YouTube for learning. I think this will probably blow the roof off of what YouTube did to education.
Yeah, I think it's already happening, because for instance, if in Oculus, one of the best experiences actually you can see a film and you can do an entire interaction with your friends. For instance, actually part of our team is already doing sports on Metaverse. And I think that's a big industry. So I want to touch actually precisely the sports and the advertising, because I know that's two areas that you've been very involved. Right. Sports mostly because, of course, you've been working with Mark Cuban, and advertisement and marketing because it's one of your key areas. This is as well a massive impact because, of course, at the moment, if you have the minority scenario, minority report scenario that you can actually go through a location and start, for instance, in New York, there's the air tax. Okay, that actually can build on the top of the buildings and actually can do some virtual stuff, and you can actually get an advertisement or publicity on that. How do you see these two industries on the metaverse?
I think sports, again, training and just giving people the ability to feel like a pro. Like the NFL just released a VR app on the Meta Quest 2, and it's one of the more popular apps, and it just allows you to be a quarterback. So you can watch Tom Brady, and then you can go and try to be the best version of Tom Brady in the game. And we've already seen that there's a lot of demand for that, but like with Madden and NBA 2K and some of the games that exist. But this just takes it to a whole nother level and dimension, because you can actually be in it, and like the perspective that you are looking at is, one, immersive, but two, it's like the actual situation. It's not a bird's eye view. And I think that that's like super fascinating. And we're going to continue to see that. It started even with tennis and boxing, and they've got VR soccer. Like, there's just so much that's happened on that front that I think, the sports world will eventually lean into. And again, like, there's going to be training opportunities, because on one end we have the stuff that you can do for sports and entertainment, like for fun and entertainment, but there's going to be like someone that says, hey, like let me dial in here, and like, for a boxer, like what is shadow boxing, and how can I actually, say this is the right technique. And like, if you've ever experienced the thrill of the fight, that like the game, it's not, for a boxer it's probably not real, but for a person, it's as close as to boxing you probably get without actually taking a class and going through like an actual sparring match. So I think that that's cool. On advertising, there's so much new inventory that has been created, and we don't have really the train tracks as to how we will monetize, or how we will get in front of these new spaces. And I think that there's going to be the way that, Meta goes about it. There's going to be the way that Google goes about it. But I don't think that those are going to be the only ways that exist. I think that if you're a Meta creator and you can bring people to a space, today it's probably a very it's not much different than if you're a YouTuber and you have to sell ads. Like, there's the automated way, or you can do like a brand deal. Like, I think brand deals for metaverse activations are probably one of the least widely understood things in the metaverse industry and just advertising industry today. And the question is, who do you partner with? Everyone's going to brands, so you see a lot of cross brand partnerships. And with the Decentralized Fashion Week, where they had the Metaverse Fashion Week, you did see a lot of crossover with individual groups. And if you go into VR chat, you can see, there's some brands and companies in there. But for the most part, it's still a wide open industry, greenfield opportunity. And what I would do is I would probably start like an agency of sorts, where I would find all the people that are actually bringing people into VR, like not bots, not like building really cool things, and it's a ghost town after they've been built, but like people that are actually showing up consistently every day or every week and doing unique things. And as I built the relationship with those people, I would try to find brands in advertising opportunities that were, one, authentic to what they do, but two, allow them to that really empowers the relationship on both sides. It gives the brand a great taste of what it's like to be in the metaverse, and it gives the creator a confirmation that like they're doing the right thing. Because if you're in the metaverse today, like you have to have a pretty strong sense of self-awareness, because you're going in and you're doing the same thing and you're showing up. And if one person shows up, great. If 5 people show up, that's incredible. But most times, you're going to have, 0 people show up in your activation unless you pour a lot of time and money into just getting people there on the activation day. And then after that, it's a ghost town.
So I want to touch one of these areas, and I know it's passing 1 hour, so I want to be respectful of your time. So
Yep.
one thing in terms of, so if you look at and you touch a very important thing. So because we start this podcast talking about the digital identity and the digital value that comes out of the metaverse,
Right.
and in the other end, we touch the creator economy for the creators, because mostly 99% of the internet is created by creators that are 1% of the internet. Let's put it that way. But the
Right.
challenge is that, so at the moment, the creator economy is $104.2 billion. This is data from August 2022. And actually, the gig economy is around $1 trillion, if we see different metrics. So the challenge, like you said, is that if you are a creator in YouTube, like me and so forth, you really don't make too much money out of YouTube unless you are really just selling YouTube inside of YouTube. And it's very complex. But what you can do is building the brand and so forth. So one of the challenge and opportunities that will come is, as we start certify, and for instance, you did your book about the NFTs and book. If you certify everyone in the internet, a lot of the bots will disappear. I'm sure if once, let's say, the next stage, once every one of us will have our own certified avatar, which will be another challenge in a lot of different ways. So how do you see these two parts? Because this is going to be a big challenge, because in the end of the day, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, a lot of these things is bots talking with bots and machine to machine. But I think the point is that a creator still needs to create this fire. And like you said, making sure that there's a community that talks. It might be 10, 20 super influencers that talking with other super networks of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, depending on what it is. So how do you see this layer? Because this is probably the biggest challenge and opportunity that we have here.
I think we're probably 20 years away from that, because we have to, like, the trust. Who do you trust? And I think that's the whole purpose of blockchain, is to get away from corporations and allow for people to trust the decentralized nature of the blockchain, right? And if you don't have a blockchain, you have to put all your trust in a corporation. What we didn't realize, like when we first did this, let's just say 20 years ago, is what implications that would have for the future. And now we live in that reality where, is Google too powerful? Is Amazon, do they have too much data? Is Meta, is it fair that they have, all the information about your friend networks and all that good stuff, right? Like, I don't want to get into that specifically, but it's just, those are questions that are had. Regulators are trying to figure out, new ways they can kind of put handcuffs on some of these corporations from growing, but the damage has been done. And so the way I think about the decentralized economy is like, you own your data, but by you owning your data and you having a real role in the participation, or the part of, what I'm saying, in that is you have to, there's a lot more responsibility on the user, and users aren't used to managing wallets and private keys and figuring out, how to get data from one place to the other. Like, they're not used to that. And so until that is streamlined on the blockchain side, the corporations do have a leg up, because to do what you just asked me, your identity is already exists on YouTube because of your Google account. It already exists in the communication sense because your Google account is tied to a Gmail. It's like an email. And so, like, our digital identities, even on Facebook, I can message you in Messenger and WhatsApp and Instagram. Like, we've figured out the identity part as far as it worked in Web 2.0. The thing that Web 3 has to show us is, how do you make something just as easy and ubiquitous as the already existing options, which already have billions of users on just about all of these platforms, right? So I do have faith. Like, I'm optimistic and very bullish that this will turn a corner, and that the decentralized blockchain side will win. But I also know that it's going to take a ton of time. Like, this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow and everyone's just going to say kumbaya, like we did it. This is going to be something that really takes potentially, it could take as long as 20 years, because this is one of those things where if you do it too fast and you mess it up, no one's going to have trust in it. If you build it the right way, it's just, you have to onboard and educate, and it takes time for people to become educated and for things to become kind of common knowledge.
I would say 20 years, but I agree that it will be probably 10, because I think the challenge, and you touch a very important point, and I want to probably, for the sake of this podcast,
10 years, yeah, like we'll see massive. We've already seen it. Like 10 years ago, when Bitcoin was, in its infancy stages, we were giving people paper wallets, and I think people forget about that. Today, you would never give anybody a paper wallet. You'd give them a Ledger or a MetaMask account, or or another wallet for their phone. 10 years from now, from 10 years from today, there might be an instance where even that it just runs in the background. But what I'm thinking about is, it's not the techie people like you and me, it's the Luddites that you got to convert.
No, I agree.
Right? Like, the iPhone reached 1 billion users a long time ago. But now they are just now getting to a point where a whole family might have an iPhone. Because I remember when the iPhone was cool and trendy, there was still a lot of green chats, like in my friend groups and green bubbles in my family situations. But now, even the people that didn't want to get an iPhone got an iPhone because they don't want to get excluded from the FaceTime and messages. So it took the iPhone 15 years to really get to that point where there's this universal vision where people that want an iPhone have it. The people that got bullied into getting an iPhone because of their loved ones, et cetera, or peer group, they're now on it. And so now Apple has changed and shifted their whole prerogative of a company. They don't sell phones really anymore. They are a software company that sells subscriptions. Like that's literally the name of the game for them. And so it's just that's why I think it's gonna take, it took the iPhone 15 years to get there. We're talking about digital identity and rethinking that entirely. It's probably gonna take a little bit longer than even where it took iPhone to get to where it got.
No, I agree, and I think it's important to put a lot of realism on this, because of course you and me we are speeding up, but the reality is much more. And most of people only use one app or two in the iPhone,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's another thing as well. So it's complete. So I will. Well, I have much more questions, but I think for today, I think we'll stop here because it's 1 hour more, and I think I would like people just to repeat. Please buy the book. I really suggest it. I'm not saying this because, I like you, QuHarrison, but it's a really great book. And it's
Thank you.
really, a lot of these questions are answered. But I think I'll finish with this, is that in the end of the book, there's a metaverse plan, okay? And I think this part here is probably, if you want to highlight just on that as the last part, is that is designing the metaverse plan for brands, corporations with IP. And you touched that because part of the avatar, or the avatar, let's say, ID that you're going to have in
Yeah.
the future,
Yeah.
because it's going to be about this IP creation. And I think, for instance, it's interesting because you got your forward by Paris Hilton, that of course is known as a celebrity, but she's actually trademarking a lot of things on the metaverse, which is quite impressive. I don't know if you want to finalize with that, because I think that's part of at the moment, I think the question of most of the people listening to us, how the hell will I use this? Is this an hype? Can I get out of this something? And I think that's the challenge that I see all the brands asking.
So I'll tell everybody, if you want to get in the metaverse, just go do something. Go learn, go just create an account, make an avatar, and go see what's out there. Play some games, get a feel for it. If you've done that, then ask yourself, am I an individual? So am I a creator, or am I a brand? And if I'm a brand, what type of brand? Am I a retailer? Am I a education or informational brand? Like what, just B2B brands? Like you'll know what type of brand you are, but like figure that out. I think for the B2C companies, you want to like think of it as an extension to your e-commerce strategy. Like that's where I would think of the metaverse today. It doesn't really need its own strategy unless you're going to spend a lot of money on this and take a really serious approach and know that what you're getting into is going to take a decade, if not more. So if you're not ready to play in the sandbox for a decade or more, then I would just modify your e-commerce strategy to include the metaverse as a channel. And I think that that's a reasonable enough bet where most people can do that. It probably can spend a quarter at most to figure out the logistics on that. And once they've implemented that, they have a channel where they can play and learn, and they can get familiar with some of the creators and just even collaborate, right? Like if you've got this channel and you figured out how to make it work for your e-commerce situation, now you've opened the door for potential collaborations in the future. If you're a B2B brand, I would really start to think about the whole digital twin element that we talked about in this conversation. What elements of your business today could be empowered by a chatbot, or already being empowered by a bot or chatbot of sorts? And if it's not that, what could you automate? Like, in the sense of running a simulation in the factory, you can create that stuff today. You probably already have all the data. It's just a matter you didn't know it was possible. So that's one thing that I would really look at, and it can create a lot of efficiencies. Also, for all corporations, the metaverse, if you're doing any type of remote work, as explained on this call earlier, it's a great way to bring people together that aren't in the same place or easily accessible locations. You don't have to put your office, I always describe it as the laptop for productivity, the headset for culture. and collaboration, right? And you can get away from some of the stigmas that are associated with Zoom when you go into the headset platforms, and once people get comfortable in there. And then lastly, for creators, I think, your metaverse plan should be one of, look at this as a new channel. People that paid attention to Instagram in 2011, in 2012, they did really well because they were on the platform before the masses got there. And the same thing with TikTok. People that were on TikTok 2-3 years ago are doing really well today because they were not late to the party. This is a platform where if you start to create, you start to post, you start to build a presence, you're going to start to collect, a following of sorts. And when it's time for the masses to get on board, all of the companies, all the creators are going to be looking to showcase who's doing fascinating things with their tech. And right now, it's never been easier to really stand out because it is a ghost town in many of these cases. So the talent required to really stand out today is a much lower threshold than what it will ever be again in the future.
Thank you so much, QuHarrison. Another great incentive and inspiration, and a lot of concrete stuff that I think everyone can get out of this. Thank you once again.
Thank you.